Bills Mafia. On today's Air Raid Hour pregame, we will be breaking down what we expect to see from the Bills today as they take on the Indianapolis Colts. Injury updates, key matchups, and our pregame superlatives are all coming up. But first,
Welcome to the Air Raid Hour, a Cover One Network podcast. Here are your hosts, Judge Mathis and Tilt Money.
welcome in, ladies and gentlemen, to the Air Raid Hour pregame show brought to you by the Cover One Sports Network. My name is Steve Mathis. You can find me on X at the Bills Guys, joined as always by Dave Tilton. You can find him on X at Tilt Money. And Dave, we will be talking about things like injuries in a moment because there's a ton of those to get to. And I don't mean in any way, shape, or form to put the Colts down because I think that this is a potential playoff team. And we're going to be discussing all these individual matchups in a moment. But this is a game, despite all the injuries that the Buffalo Bills have, that, and this is sort of a recurring theme these last couple of weeks with some of the teams we faced, it's just a game that if you're the Buffalo Bills that's on your schedule, you have to win. The Jets have a tough matchup today. The Pats have a tough matchup today. The Dolphins have a tough matchup today, or at least this weekend, because I think the
Monday
Dolphins
night,
play on Monday night. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
They all play some worthy opponents. So if you're the Buffalo Bills, you're really looking to get a W again this week, even despite the injuries and the fact that you're playing a decent opponent. And we could be looking at another scenario where the AFC East goes 0-3. The Bills want to widen this gap in the AFC East as much as possible before they head into a much tougher back half of their schedule this year.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the last thing you want to do is give these other teams any sense of hope. And we talked about that last week against the Dolphins, right? Like, don't give that team. I mean, they still have a pulse, obviously, but make it that much harder for them, right? And you mentioned the tough matchups. Again, this Colts team that the Bills are playing today really had a tough time last week, even with Joe Flacco at the helm. Only 159 passing yards, 68 rushing yards, their lowest offensive output of the season against the Vikings last week. This is a team that is going to be without Michael Pittman. We're going to talk about that today. This is one you have to have if you're the Bills. It's a conference game. The conference tiebreakers are important. They're one of the more important tiebreakers as you start to get bunched up in the AFC standings beyond the head-to-head. And this is just one where if you're the Bills, I know it's going to be a road game, but it's going to be perfect conditions inside at Lucas Oil Stadium. You have some injuries, but as we said on X and in the Discord chat, you still have Khalil Shakir. You still have both your tight ends, Knox and Kincaid. You still have James Cook and Ray Davis out of the backfield that can be weapons. So you're not short necessarily on options, even if we expect, as it seems, that Amari Cooper probably won't be playing in this game. But you're not short on options if you're the Bills offensively. So you have to have this game separate even further in the division.
Taking a look now at some of the things that we always do in the pregame show. Start with the weather. Weather's not going to be a factor in this game. It is, as you mentioned, Lucas Oil Field, a retractable roof. I didn't even look at the weather. If the weather's good, maybe the roof is open. And if not, the roof will just be closed. And the Buffalo Bills do not have to worry about any types of conditions this week. As for injuries, that's a completely different story. Indianapolis dealing with some injuries. They got Bernard Raymond back this week. They're really good run blocking, young left tackle, but they are without Michael Pittman, which I know you're probably going to want to speak on in a moment. And they're also without their pivot, like their center, Ryan Kelly, headed off to injured reserve. Tanner Bortolini, a guy that we were pretty high on in the pre-draft process, he gets the start at center this week for the Indianapolis Colts. So they got a rookie in the pivot. They're lacking their number one receiver in Michael Pittman. A couple of major injuries for the Indianapolis Colts that they are dealing with.
And if you are the interior of the Bills defensive line, and I know we went back and watched the game again, and there were some really good reps from Ed Oliver in that last game against the Miami Dolphins that didn't necessarily reflect in the box score. You have to be excited about the potential to face this Colts interior offensive line without Ryan Kelly. I know they still have Quentin Nelson, and I know they still have others that are good, but straight up the middle of that offensive line of the Colts, the Bills have not been good analytically in generating pressure from their interior defensive line this year. This is a game where you can maybe get back on track without Ryan Kelly there, Ed Oliver forcing his way up the middle against a extremely immobile quarterback in Joe Flacco, one of the most immobile quarterbacks the Bills will play this year. Big for them there. And then without Michael Pittman, obviously this Colts team, they don't really use their tight ends much. So there's the second least targeted tight end team, only behind the Giants. They've got Josh Downs back. Obviously now he's really been kind of their number one. And A.D. Mitchell, I guess, is probably going to slide in on the outside, the opposite of Alec Pierce. So they'll have some threats, but the Bills have been really good about limiting the big play. So to me, this comes down to like you're primarily focusing your efforts on Josh Downs and Jonathan Taylor in this game over the Bills. So it's lining up pretty good for the Bills, even with their own injuries, that the Colts are missing some key people as well.
The Buffalo Bills, they will be without rookie Keon Coleman, who is out for this game with his wrist injury, and he could be out multiple weeks. We might not see him until after the bye week. Balin Spector, with his calf injury, was placed on injured reserve, so there is an open roster spot that we will discuss in a moment here as well. Questionable for the game are Amari Cooper and Reggie Gilliam. And then I'm not really too sure about Curtis Samuel, because if you look at Buffalo Bills PR and the graphic that they sent out, there is no designation for Curtis Samuel. But if you go to the Buffalo Bills website, Curtis Samuel, who was a limited participant all week in practice, is listed as questionable. The Buffalo Bills elevated both Tyrell Shavers and KJ Hamler to the active roster for this game, plus signed Jalen Virgil to the 53 this week. So maybe Curtis Samuel plays, maybe Curtis Samuel does not. But the Buffalo Bills are going to be with Khalil Shakir, Matt Collins, maybe Curtis Samuel, Jalen Virgil, Tyrell Shavers, and KJ Hamler. Not the best, but the Buffalo Bills are playing a team that struggles to get pass rush and has not been the greatest pass defense this year. Josh Allen should still be able to operate in a pretty decent manner, even with this less than ideal receiving core.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I mean, my gut tells me that Cooper's not going to play. But look, I mean, Matt Collins, he's been kind of somewhat of a polarizing figure among the Bills Mafia. Some people, really kind of setting realistic expectations for him. Others kind of being a little too hard on him. I think he was very important last week in the game against Miami. I'm not saying you want to count on that every single week, but he was reliable last week, making some good third down catches, caught all 5 of his targets. And you still have Khalil Shakir. Like we mentioned, you still have the 2 tight ends. You still have Cook and Davis out of the backfield. So then if you do have a Curtis Samuel, or maybe on the off chance they do activate Amari Cooper, which I don't expect to happen, the cupboard's not bare, right? And yet, yes, Josh Allen should still be able to operate against this team who's bottom 10 in passing yards per game allowed. And we're going to get into the DVOA here in a second. But this is a game that the Bills should still be able to move the ball pretty effectively.
The Buffalo Bills made a ton of roster moves this week. They released Mike Edwards. They released and then signed Zion Logue back to the practice squad. They placed Balin Spector on injured reserve, and they added to the roster, and they still have one open roster spot, but Jordan Phillips, Quentin Jefferson, Jalen Virgil are all now part of the Buffalo Bills active roster. I expect Virgil to be active in this game. I don't know about one of Jordan Phillips and Quentin Jefferson is likely going to play in this game. I see Quentin Jefferson as Dwayne Smoot replacement, with Dwayne Smoot placed in IR. I forgot to mention that as well. So is Quentin Jefferson going to be up to speed in time? I don't know, but I expect all 3 of these guys to probably get playing time today.
Yeah, and I mean, people will talk about Jordan Phillips and being in the analytics around how bad he's been against the run. But if you go back to what we said at the beginning of the show, really one of the main issues the Bills have had from their interior is generating an interior rush. And that is an area where Jordan Phillips has been
Mhm.
good in the past and has been good on the Bills. And I think the best version of Jordan Phillips is on the Bills. I'm not saying he's going to be like a hugely impactful player for them. I'm just saying as a fit and kind of an area where you've been lacking in an interior pass rush, maybe he can help a little bit there. And Quentin Jefferson, like you said, probably the Smoot replacement. I think that's a good fit for what they want to do.
Mhm.
Smoot, that bigger sort of bodied edge type of player. Quentin Jefferson, you can move inside and out. I think the fact that he is familiar with McDermott, maybe it's different with
Yeah.
Babbage here as far as maybe some of the terminology is different, but I think he should be able to slide back in and play some snaps. Virgil, we saw him play earlier in the year. They used him a lot on motion, more so as like a decoy or as as a tell to see what the defense maybe was going to be doing. But um, I wouldn't mind if he was playing that type of role again today for the Bills and kind of just making life just that much easier for Josh Allen sort of pre-snap. So I'm kind of good with all of it.
All right. Let's start now with the Buffalo Bills offense versus the Indianapolis Colts defense. And Dave, before you get into and dive into sort of the DVOA, we do have a super chat here from Justin Tyndall. He says, would like Knox to be involved, only has 13 targets, thinks Colts will try to take away Dalton Kincaid. Josh, most rushing yards, it's 54. Can see legs factor in as well. And yeah, I can see a lot of those things. Obviously, Dalton Kincaid is probably going to be a focal point of this Indianapolis Colts defense with all of these receivers out. But if you look at this Colts defense this year, they are 31st in the NFL in receptions allowed to the tight end position. So I expect a big game today from Dalton Kincaid. And then I think that you are once again going to see Dawson Knox augment and play a nice auxiliary role in this Buffalo Bills offense. You saw in that Seattle game, he made a couple of really nice catches for a total of 50 yards. I think it's going to be a big game for Kincaid, and I also think Dawson Knox is going to play a role as well.
I mean, you would think last week, the Vikings, 5 catches for Josh Oliver, 3 catches for TJ Hawkinson in his first game back, sort of from that injury, in a game where the Vikings really didn't need a ton on offense, to be honest, to win that game. The Colts were really doing nothing on offense. So 8 catches combined from the tight ends for the Vikings a week ago. And the Vikings, haven't really been known as a tight end powerhouse so far this year offensively. Obviously, it was TJ's first game back, and Josh Oliver and Jeremy Munt, like, really not moving the needle much. So if those guys can have success against the Colts defense, you would like to think that Dalton Kincaid and Dawson Knox can have some success. I really hope that those two combined exceed the 8 catches that Hawkinson and Oliver had a week ago. I would love to see Kincaid and Knox combine for 10 plus catches in this game. What that means target wise, I don't know. It'd be nice if they were efficient with those targets, but I could see those guys combining for 10 plus catches in this game. And that's not a hot take or anything. I think that's a reasonable expectation given how bad the Colts have been against the tight end.
Yeah, on to now sort of the DVOA every week in the pregame. We take a look at some of the advanced analytics and what they say about our opponent's offense, or excuse me, our opponent's defense. So, what is the DVOA telling you about this Colts defense? Where are they strong? Where are they weak?
Yeah, so Colts defense coming into this, they're 20th overall in DVOA defense. They're 28th against the pass, 17th against the rush. They've really struggled in pass defense this year. They're 7th worst in raw statistics compared to 5th worst in DVOA. So we do have alignment here with the raw statistics sort of agreeing with the DVOA. They've allowed the 7th highest yards per attempt in the NFL. And they've played some teams who have really struggled to pass the ball. The Titans, the Miami Dolphins, the Pittsburgh Steelers. Pittsburgh Steelers having one of their better passing games of the season with Justin Fields, by the way, at the time against this Colts pass D. So that stands out where the 282 passing yards allowed to the Pittsburgh Steelers. Not good if you're the Colts pass defense. Against individual positions, they're 10th against wide receiver ones, 24th against wide receiver twos, 27th wide receiver threes. We just mentioned how bad they've been against the tight end, 26th in DVOA against the tight ends, and 19th against running backs out of the backfield. They've allowed some big games to receivers that have been somewhat inconsistent this year. If you think about George Pickens, hasn't really hit, he's had some inconsistencies. DJ Moore, who has had some inconsistencies with the Chicago Bears, had one of his better games receiving against this Colts D. So the opportunity should be there. The DVOA has not been kind to the Colts in their passing D, and it aligns with the raw statistics. Now we move over to the rushing defense. This is where it's a little interesting. They're the second worst in raw stats in yards per game allowed compared to 17th in DVOA. So DVOA is telling us here maybe their rush defense isn't quite as bad as the raw statistics would tell you. They're still bottom half. They are only allowing 4.4 yards per carry, which is top half of the NFL. They've only allowed 7 rushing TDs, which is also top half of the NFL, but they've allowed some big games on the ground. Week 1 against Houston, 200 yards rushing allowed. Week 2 against Green Bay, 200 rushing yards allowed. Week 7 against Miami, 188 rushing yards allowed. There's only been 2 games all year where they've held their opponents under 100 yards rushing, and they just gave up 133 yards on the ground to Minnesota. They have played 5 of the top 12 rush offenses in the league: Green Bay, Pittsburgh, Miami, Houston, Tennessee. So I think that's where DVOA is giving them a break a little bit based on some of the opponents they've played. But this is still a team, if you're the Bills, that you should be able to run against. And as a Bills team who is one of the better rushing teams in the league, you should be able to have success against this team on the ground. But that is the one area where if the Bills maybe have a little bit of inefficiency on the ground today, it's not because the Colts are some great run D. They have been tested against some of the good and better run offenses in the league this year, but still a very weak defense near the bottom in DVOA and passing, bottom half in rushing. And that's where it all kind of adds up for the Bills need to have success on offense today against this Colts team.
Yeah, I mean, as you mentioned, the Colts are 28th in DVOA pass defense, 30th in adjusted sack percentage. Josh Allen should be able to stay clean for most of this game and operate in whatever way he wants to. Now, whether his receivers can get open, they can scheme his receivers to get open. That's to be determined, but you have to feel confident that despite the injuries, the Buffalo Bills should be able to do what they want to do, or at least be serviceable through the air today because of the weaknesses of this Colts pass defense. And then when you can marry the pass game and the run game and you can run the ball efficiently, which the statistics tell us the Buffalo Bills should be able to run the ball efficiently, given how great this offensive line has been all year. The advanced metrics kind of show that. I know Aaron Quinn was talking about adjusted yards percentage earlier on in the comment section, adjusted line yards, excuse me. So that's something like this. The offensive line gets a push and the running backs can be effective. So when you can marry that run game, you can take your shots in the pass game. The Buffalo Bills should be able to do whatever it is they want to do in this game. It's just a matter now of going out there and executing it with some of these injuries that they're dealing with.
Yeah, and I mean, if you think about it, I know the Miami Dolphins and I know the Tennessee Titans were not good teams as far as like toxic plays and on defense, right? Yardage wise, they were very good teams as far as defensively, right? Miami and Tennessee, both one of the top passing defenses in the league. Now the Bills come in and they get maybe a little bit of a softer test against the Colts pass D that has not been good. And we go back to the Seattle game, the last time they played a team that really statistically struggled against the pass, and they had a very efficient game, and one of their better third down offense games against that Seattle pass D as well. So this game, no rain, right? Like regardless of what the situation is, weather, Lucas Oil, you said, like, if it's nice, still keep it open, then weather shouldn't be an issue anyway. If not, it'll be closed and it should be perfect conditions for this team. And I think that, yeah, I mean, on paper, right? And this is why they play the games, but on paper, this Bills offense should really have a big advantage.
We got a comment here from Aaron Quinn. He says, I believe Khalil Shakir can do more on the outside than he gets credit for, and today you might need it. He also follows up and says, Shakir going to show how versatile he is. And the Buffalo Bills might want to limit the use of Khalil Shakir in the slot today, not just because of all of the injuries, but because of the matchup. Kenny Moore, their slot corner, is probably one of the best nickel corners in the game. When you think of some of the best nickel corners in football, the names that get mentioned are Taron Johnson, who we know quite well here in Buffalo, and guys like Kenny Moore. And now guys like Devin Witherspoon are putting their names and their hat into the ring in Seattle as well. But one of the top nickel corners in the league, you can get Khalil Shakir off of that guy by moving him around a little bit more today and using him in different spots.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, the Bills, again, this could be a reason why they bring Jalen Virgil up to the active roster, right? Use some pre-snap motion, figure out where Kenny Moore is going to be on the field. In some cases, you may not be able to avoid him. In some cases, you maybe can. And like, that's why even if it's a situation where Khalil Shakir is matched up against Kenny Moore, then a guy like Matt Collins probably is going to have to step up. A guy like Dalton Kincaid and Dawson Knox, they're going to have to step up. But I think the one thing you do have if you're the Bills is like you have not so much like Shakir's versatility to worry about, but you have guys that at least in recent weeks have proven that they can be reliable. So in the beginning of the season, maybe that wasn't necessarily the case for a guy like Matt Collins, but I do think Matt Collins today maybe plays a bigger role than people think. And then Shakir, I think, is going to do his thing. I think you can maybe see him even on some wide receiver screens on the outside. That's worked well for the Bills as well with him. So I certainly think that he will have an impact on this game. That maybe the yards per catch aren't great, but I still think he's going to be, as we say, peppered with targets in this one.
We mentioned a guy like Dawson Knox at the top of the show as well, and guys like him will play a role sort of in an auxiliary role, and you want to have Dawson Knox catching a couple of key targets here and there in this game. You want to get Matt Collins the ball a couple of times in this game just because of how shallow our depth at wide receiver is, and those guys will certainly play a role. But to me, I think that this offense today is about four guys. I think it's about James Cook, Ray Davis, Dalton Kincaid, and Khalil Shakir. If you can get a big game from two of those four guys, I think you're in pretty good shape. If you can get a big game from three of those four guys, I think you're in great shape. If you get a big game from all four of those guys, something went catastrophically wrong if you lose this football game. I can easily envision a world today in which James Cook and Ray Davis combine for over 200 all-purpose yards and accumulate multiple touchdowns. And I think maybe a more likely scenario in this football game is Cook has a big day, 100-plus type of all-purpose yards, a score or two, with one of those two receivers, Kincaid or Shakir, popping off for a big game, with the other two having strong auxiliary type of games. But those four guys, I think, are the key contributing factors for this offense and who it should be funneled through today.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And I also think you could see a lot of, first, second read immediately, maybe not there, getting the ball to James Cook and Ray Davis in the passing game. Cook with 5 catches last week. We obviously know Davis had the big touchdown catch a week ago as well, but both of those guys very capable in the passing game out of the backfield. I do feel like those guys, as much as they should be able to have success on the ground as well, if they also contribute in the passing game, I think that's a good sign for the Bills and probably means that they are moving the ball effectively. And to your point, maybe 3 or 4 of those guys have a big game.
When you look at the Colts defense, to me, they really funnel through the interior front seven. Grover Stewart, DeForest Buckner, those guys are absolute beasts. And Zaire Franklin is having a really good season at linebacker. They're pretty stout in the spine of that defense. They went out of their way on Sunday Night Football to sort of highlight that triumvirate of players, and they all had a pretty good game. The Buffalo Bills offensive line is really good. One of my keys to the game is the line of scrimmage is going to be a factor. We mentioned already the Bills are third in adjusted line yards, meaning they get a solid push week in and week out. Thank you to Aaron Quinn for that stat. I saw it on his X handle this week. But those 3 guys are going to be 3 guys that you need to take into account and you need a game plan against if you're the Buffalo Bills.
Yeah, Buckner is an absolute beast, and I know they have struggled a little bit yardage wise against the run, but as we've said, they've played 5 of the top 12 rushing offenses, and they've kind of stopped the bleeding a bit over the last 2 weeks, but they're still susceptible. And I think if you're the Bills, one of the things that you might look at in this running game is some of those continue some of those zone, mid zone, wide zone runs that had success and kind of getting the push from the offensive line in one direction and having guys like Davis and Cook cut back against the grain, against that push. I think that is an area where you can be successful if you're the Bills running the ball. And I think that plays into the Bills' strengths and also kind of maybe takes away some of the Colts' strength on their rushing defense and up the spine of that defense. So it's going to be really important for the Bills' offensive line to get push and move the line of scrimmage. And then really guys getting up to the second level, whether it's Spencer Brown or others, kind of potentially making additional blocks on guys like Franklin, right? I think if the Bills can get these backs into the second level and kind of have their offensive line continue to work up the field and get these double blocks going, then that's going to be key. If the Bills struggle off on the offensive line to move the line of scrimmage, then that's where you're probably going to see a guy like Zaire Franklin have a big day from the linebacker position and coming in with like double-digit tackles. Although it wouldn't surprise me if he has that anyway, but effective double-digit tackles against this Bills run game. So it does start up front. I think the Bills really need to do a good job like they have, more so, I guess, in the Seattle game than they did against Miami. But go back to that Seattle game and kind of look at what worked for you there. And I think that's a game plan for if you're the Bills running game today, to kind of neutralize some of those really talented players that Colts have up the middle.
Transitioning now to the Buffalo Bills defense. What does the DVOA tell us about this Colts offense? Where are they effective? And I know maybe a lot of this DVOA is kind of a liar because the Colts have made a change at quarterback, and a lot of that DVOA takes into account Anthony Richardson, who is. Could there be any bigger a difference between two quarterbacks than Joe Flacco and Anthony Richardson? You kind of have the polar opposite ends of the quarterback spectrum there with the two guys in Indy. But Joe Flacco is now in for Anthony Richardson.
Joe Flacco in. Colts offense, DVOA 19th overall, so outside the top half, 20th in passing offense, 10th in rushing offense. So we'll get to that in a second. But passing, they're 22nd overall in the raw statistics versus 20th in DVOA. So they are aligning here. The Colts have the fourth lowest quarterback rating in the NFL, 76.4 across the season. Now, again, a lot of that is with Anthony Richardson. They've played a mixed bag of passing defenses this year. Jacksonville, Minnesota, both bottom 5, and the Colts did struggle to throw the ball against a very bad Minnesota pass D statistically. But Tennessee, Miami, as we've talked about, and we've played them as well, both very good passing defenses. Tennessee still first in the league in passing yards allowed. But the last two games, 140 and 159 passing yards in the last two games. And that was with Anthony Richardson the game before and Joe Flacco in this game against Minnesota. So the other thing to state here is Joe Flacco has been sacked as many times as Anthony Richardson in half as many games. So the passing offense for the Colts hasn't been explosive as far as consistency. They've hit some big plays with Alec Pierce down the field. I know that. And they had that one really good passing game against the Tennessee Titans, which is boosting their DVOA slightly against a team that has a good pass defense. Joe Flacco played that game. Weird game, by the way, that game was. And then in rushing, they're 16th in raw stats, 10th in DVOA. So DVOA is favoring them slightly here, just right at the bottom of that top 10. And keep in mind, Jonathan Taylor had missed a few games, is now back, has played in the last two games. Colts have played two of the top 4 run defenses in the league, Minnesota and Pittsburgh, and 3 other teams in the top 13, Tennessee, Houston, Miami. So they've been tested in playing some good run defenses, just like they've themselves have played some good run offenses. So it is a little bit of a better story if you're the Colts and you're kind of looking for some silver lining in this game and what you can do. They've run the ball decently well. They have Jonathan Taylor back now, and the Bills have been susceptible a bit to teams' running games. So if you're the Colts, this is where you focus. You're 10th in DVOA rushing. The one thing they haven't done necessarily, which I think they will focus on this week, and this is something that I would do if I was them, Jonathan Taylor in the 2 games back so far has only had 4 combined receptions. I think if they can get Jonathan Taylor involved in the passing game out of the backfield, and we saw Achane and Mostert last week have success, that is an area where the Colts can focus. But if I'm the Colts and I'm looking at the analytics, I'm going to try to give Jonathan Taylor 20 to 25 carries in this game.
Yeah, there's just so many factors and so many directions you can go to sort of talk about this Colts matchup on offense with the Buffalo Bills defense. Let's just start with the quarterback position, right? And Joe Flacco stepping in for Anthony Richardson. He's got uh even with Michael Pittman out, he's got an assortment of weapons. You mentioned Jonathan Taylor in the run game, which we're going to talk about extensively here. Alec Pierce, downfield threat. Adney Mitchell, likely going to get more run as the season continues and is likely going to sort of platoon with a guy like Ashton Doolin, who was getting a bunch of jet sweep and motion stuff last week for the Colts. I noticed when watching that game on Sunday night. He'll step into that Michael Pittman spot. They have an assortment of tight ends, guys like Mo Alley Cox, Kyle Granson. I expect those guys, I expect one of those two guys to have like a solid game, or those guys as a combination to have a solid game, because Shane Steichen, I really respect him as an offensive play caller. And I guarantee you he saw what like the Tennessee Titans did to this Buffalo Bills defense and took advantage of the pass rushers getting up the field. And he's probably salivating at that with the likes of Jonathan Taylor. He can get the ball into the hands too. And I think he'll get the ball into the hands of some of his tight ends as well in this game. So don't sleep on any of those tight ends just because they're not as big a names as other guys. But the one name I haven't mentioned yet is the one I want to start with, because he is a guy that you and I think a lot of people in the Buffalo Bills community absolutely loved in the pre-draft process a couple of years ago. We were on record saying we were comfortable with the Buffalo Bills drafting this guy at the end of round 1, and that is Joshua Downs, their slot receiver, Indianapolis. He has really come on now that Joe Flacco has replaced Anthony Richardson. Last week against Minnesota, he was targeted on almost 50% of his snaps. Like when he's on the field, this guy gets the ball thrown his way. Downs has been one of the most productive slot receivers in the NFL this season, ranking 5th with 343 receiving yards lined up there. The Buffalo Bills defense has kind of struggled with slot receivers this year, 28th in yards allowed to slot receivers. So this could be a player in Josh Downs, outside of Jonathan Taylor, the obvious, that really can exploit this Buffalo Bills defense.
Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned the target share last week, because like there were Colts fans screaming online during that game, and I was following along. Like, why is Josh Downs not on the field? But then when he was on the field, he was getting targeted. He led the team in targets by playing and played fewer snaps than the top two receivers in that game. And also, he leads the team in catches with 38, and he's played 2 fewer games than a guy like Michael Pittman. So 38 catches leads that team. He is a chain mover. He's slippery in sort of the short areas. He's a very good route runner. Guys like Dorian Williams, Taron Johnson, right? Like these guys in coverage are going to be tested today. That matchup between Taron Johnson and Josh Downs, where conversely we talk about Shakir against Kenny Moore. The battle of slot receivers against the slot corners in today's game is maybe one of the best or under the radar storylines we have into this one. Josh Downs, I think, will probably be the focus of the Bills' pass D today, and they're going to probably trust guys like Benford, and they're going to trust guys like Benford and Douglas to do their thing that they've been doing on the outside this year, and hope that they don't give up those big plays to Pierce and AD Mitchell, while limiting the impact Josh Downs can have. Because it's funny, we think about Josh Downs and some of the short area quickness he's had and his efficiency with his targets this year, but he's also made a couple plays down the field as well. He had the touchdown against the Titans a couple weeks ago. That was down the field. In the game where Anthony Richardson did play 2 weeks ago, he had a couple really big downfield plays as well. So my worry, if I'm the Bills, is Josh Downs maybe on some out and ups, some plays sort of coming from the slot that actually go deep. Like that's where I would look. Like if I was the Colts to try to hit a big play or two, I wouldn't be surprised if they actually try to hit a big player or two down the field to Josh Downs as well. But yeah, I agree. Outside of Jonathan Taylor, he's probably public enemy number 1 today if you're the Bills defense.
Justin Tindall comes in here with a super chat. Always appreciate you, Justin. He says Flacco scored 3 points, a field goal with 30 seconds left, a pick returned to the 25, and then 3 and out and a field goal and a fumble return for a touchdown. I believe he's talking about the Colts offensive performance last week against the Minnesota Vikings on Sunday Night Football, which wasn't impressive. But a couple of the things that I would say counter that is, no offense to the Buffalo Bills, I'm a Bills fan. The Minnesota Vikings have the best defense in football this year, in my opinion, and the Buffalo Bills defense is good, but they are not in the same stratosphere as what Minnesota is doing and Brian Flores is doing. this year. That was a really tough defense that the Indianapolis Colts went up against last week. You have Joe Flacco now another week into install, another week into getting more comfortable with this offense. It's a week-to-week league. Some teams get jacked up one week and then come and jack other people up the next week. So you really never know what to expect. And there are some things about this matchup that are pretty concerning to me. Number one, and we're going to talk about the Colts offensive line in a moment and how they struggle in pass protection, but Joe Flacco is going to get the ball out quicker than Anthony Richardson did. That's going to stymie the Buffalo Bills' ability to get a pass rush. Shane Steichen is a good offensive coordinator, and I think he's going to use misdirection this week, and he's going to take advantage of the Buffalo Bills pass rushers getting upfield. He's going to get the ball into the hands of the tight ends. He's going to get the ball into the hands of Josh Downs. He's going to get the ball into the hands of Jonathan Taylor, and there's going to be some yards after catch opportunities for the Indianapolis Colts. Jonathan Taylor on the ground. The Colts have the best run blocking offensive line in football, period. And the stats sort of show that, and we'll talk about those stats in a moment. The Buffalo Bills need to get out to an early lead, and if they don't, and the Colts are allowed to run the ball all game, they are going to do so effectively, and that's going to open things up for their passing game. And then we mentioned Josh Downs in the slot, and the Buffalo Bills have struggled against slot receivers this year. There are a number of things to be concerned about. So yes, the Colts defense or offense struggled last week, but it is a week-to-week league. I wouldn't expect that same struggle this week against the Buffalo Bills defense, even though I hope they do. I hope they do.
Yeah, and we'll see how much missing Ryan Kelly makes a difference here. And as Roy says, if Oliver and DQ can't get pressure up the middle, it's going to be a lot.
Got to get Joe Flacco on the run. Got it. He can't do anything on the run. Get him on the run.
Yeah, and this is where the defending the quick passing game of the Colts and maybe having played Miami last week is a blessing in disguise here, because you saw Tua getting the ball out quickly last week to guys out of the backfield. Achane and Mostert combined for 10 receptions. Jonnu Smith made an impact. Like Granson, Mo Alley, like those guys could be involved in this game. Like you said, like even though the Colts haven't really used the tight end a lot this year, those guys aren't pushovers. And if this was a game to get them going, it probably is if you're the Colts offense, and then Taylor out of the backfield as well. So it'll be interesting to see if the Colts try to work that quick passing game with Downs, with Taylor, with the tight ends, to kind of try to mask a little bit the loss of Ryan Kelly. Now, I don't take it for what it's worth, but PFF says the Colts have the best run blocking offensive line in the league. So,
and I got some statistics too to back that up. If you look at pass block and run block win rate, right? That's an ESPN statistic. The Colts are the NFL's best 75% run block win rate. They are the best run blocking team per ESPN's advanced analytics in the National Football League. They are bottom 5 in the NFL with a 51% pass block win rate. So that literally goes to show you sort of where the strength of this Colts offensive line is and what the Colts are going to want to do in this game. Bernard Raymond, not the greatest pass blocker, really good run blocker on that left side, especially with Quentin Nelson. Braden Smith, really good run blocker. Obviously, they're without Ryan Kelly this week, but that is a really good run blocking offensive line. And that is why it's important for the Buffalo Bills offense to score and score often, because you need to get the Indianapolis Colts to be one-dimensional. And if you can get them to be one-dimensional, you have a much better chance of winning this football game.
Right. And the Colts are going to try to keep that clock moving, try to have sustained drives, try to limit the number of possessions the Bills have, whether it's with the quick passing game or the running game with Jonathan Taylor. And it feels to me like this is a game where you have to, if you're the Bills, have success on first and second down, right? Like you can't be giving up 4 or 5 yards, 4 or 5, 6 yards on first down in this game, right? You really got to shut the door on first down in this game. Get Joe Flacco into 3rd and 8s, 3rd and 9s, 3rd and 7s. Really take the ability of Jonathan Taylor as far as a runner out of the equation on 3rd downs as well. So I think first down defense today for the Bills is really important in kind of setting the tone for, setting the tone for the success of like time of possession and things like that as well.
And that's why you see so many NFL teams now are all the good NFL offenses now are balancing the running game and the passing game because of what you just mentioned. You don't want to put yourself in down and distance situations with all these great athletes and all these great pass rushers in today's NFL. In today's NFL, you want to put yourself in second and manageable, third and manageable. If you put yourself in second and manageable, you can take a shot down the field on second down, or you can go play action on second down, or you can even use play action on first down if you are running the ball effectively on first down. So just being able to run the ball effectively, or just as an offense, being able to accumulate yards on first down effectively, that goes such a long way to helping you on second down, helping you on third down, having you set up shot plays down the field to get those big toxic differential type of explosives. So the Colts are working on that, right? And they have a quarterback now who can get the ball out a lot quicker, which is, I think, going to stymie the Buffalo Bills pass rush. If there are two things that I want to see from this game, you would assume, if someone asked the question, what do the Buffalo Bills have to do to win this football game? I think most people would say shut down Jonathan Taylor. And I can see the comment sections now talking about the last time Jonathan Taylor played the Buffalo Bills and just how badly he beat us up. And McNizzle coming in saying that was probably the best he's ever seen a running back play in person. And it was an insane game that he had. And if he does that again, obviously the Buffalo Bills are probably going to lose this football game. But if there are two things that I want to see in this game, number one, I want to see the Buffalo Bills get out to an early, significant lead. And number two, Ed Oliver and Daquan Jones need to step up on that interior, and we need to get Joe Flacco out of the pocket. If Joe Flacco cannot operate from a clean pocket in this football game, and we can consistently get him having to roll out and throw on the run, the Buffalo Bills defense will be successful in this football game. Those are the two things that I want to see. And then obviously third is making sure we shut down that run game. But I think those other two things help you shut down that run game, which is going to be really potent because of how good of a run blocking offensive line they have.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And then Charles G comes in and says Josh Downs must be stopped as well. And I'll go back to that matchup between Taron Johnson and Josh Downs on a lot of plays. Like, I also think maybe whichever slot corner, this is kind of a weird thing to say, but I think whichever slot corner from either team maybe plays a better game is also going to be a significant factor in who wins this game. Shakir versus Downs, right? Which one of those guys is going to have a bigger impact in this game could also determine the outcome. So it's a very interesting matchup, I would say. And we don't necessarily talk about these kinds of matchups all the time, but it's strength on strength when it comes to both slot receiver and slot defender in this game as well.
All right, now it is time to talk our pre-game superlatives. We will start, as we always do, with our Take Me Higher player of the game. All right, Dave, let the people know, and people in the comments section, let us know who is the Take Me Higher player of the game this week. This is a player not named Josh Allen, a star player not named Josh Allen, who has to step up for the Buffalo Bills in order for them to win this football game.
Yeah, I mean, we talked at length about Khalil Shakir, right, in that matchup against Kenny Moore, but he's been kind of the go-to guy all season. I think it's time that Dalton Kincaid steps up and has a signature game today. Colts 26th in DVOA against the tight ends. I mentioned the 8 receptions that the Vikings tight ends had a week ago, and they really haven't been a high tight end usage team either. Dalton Kincaid, it's his time to shine this week against this Colts defense. Be the guy that can make a big impact in this game. Be a guy that can carry this team, where Khalil Shakir has a bit of a tougher matchup against Kenny Moore, although I do expect him still to contribute. Dalton Kincaid's matchup is really, really good in this game, and the Colts have struggled at defending the tight end this year. So for me, I think it's time for a signature game from Dalton Kincaid. So I'm picking Dalton Kincaid as my Take Me Higher player today.
Yeah, and I was leaning towards Dalton Kincaid as well. Since you took Dalton Kincaid, I'm going to utilize my go-to here, and I'm going to say James Cook, but I'll also throw in Ray Davis. I'm just going to say the Buffalo Bills running game. Those are my Take Me Higher. The Colts defense ranks among the worst against running backs, allowing the second most yards, 149.8 per game. My prediction today is that James Cook and Ray Davis are going to combine for over 200 yards from scrimmage, all-purpose, and they're going to score 2+ touchdowns in this game. They're going to carry the weight for these injured receivers. So I am going with James Cook and the Buffalo Bills running game, which includes Ray Davis, as my Take Me Higher player of the game. Just like Just Saying 6'9" comes in and says as well. Just the Tippecanoe is with you, saying Dalton Kincaid, 8 catches, 92 yards, and a tutty. Let's manifest Dalton Kincaid having a stat line similar to the one he had against the USC Trojans when he was at Utah. 16 catches for 234 and a touch. How about we manifest that into existence, huh? 8 for 92. No, give me 16 for 232. All right, that's what I want to see in this football game. All right, up next is our wild card player of the game. All right, Dave, let the people know who is your wild card player of the game. And if you're in the comment section, feel free to share your wild card player of the game.
Yeah, you kind of hinted it already, but I'll go with the second guy you mentioned in your Take Me Higher. I think Ray Davis is a wild card today. I do think the matchup for both him and Cook is good. I think Ray Davis, again, out of the backfield, potentially making a big play. I think that Cook and Davis today will both have good games, and I think it's not necessarily imperative that they both do, but I think it will go a long way for the Bills in securing a win if Davis really complements Cook well today. And I think his yards per touch will be high, and I think he makes another big play. I think he makes another big explosive today when we start talking about our data tracking on tomorrow's show. I think we are going to talk about Ray Davis contributing to that either through the run or through the pass. So I'm going to say Ray Davis wild card today. Maybe even scores another touchdown today.
A couple of good ones coming in. Charles G says probably won't ever happen, but let's go Dawson Knox. McNizzle comes in and says Epinesa is his wild card. Jessica Tennis comes in and says Dorian Williams is her wild card. Ralph Wilson Sr. says Anku will lead DTs and tackles. Unfortunately, Eli Anku is not playing. He is on the practice squad and was not elevated this week. So unless the Bills can make some kind of roster move and sign him to the 53 with that open spot they have this morning, I don't think we're going to see Eli Anku today. Roy Collins comes in and says Von Miller. Maybe he has a big day getting to Joe Flacco, forcing Joe Flacco out of the pocket. I'm going to go with Charles G, and I'm going to go Dawson Knox. The Colts are 31st in surrendering receptions to tight ends. Knox makes one or two big plays in this game like he did in Seattle, and that's going to help this offense along today. So I'm going to go with Dawson Knox as my wild card player of the game. Ralph Wilson Sr. comes in and says, what? I was going to say this for the end of the show, but let's just talk about it now. I'm kind of ticked off at the Buffalo Bills a little bit. Like Quentin Jefferson, I get, right? He is pretty much your Dwayne Smoot replacement, that inside-outside flex. The Buffalo Bills seem to like to have guys like that, and they got that in Quentin Jefferson. But they had an open roster spot in the 53, and they chose to sign Jordan Phillips, who I'm sorry is not good at football anymore. He's not, right? And he's never been a good run defender. He's always been pass rush plus, right? That roster spot should have gone to Eli Anku, and not having Eli Anku in this game against a guy like Jonathan Taylor is a little bit frightening to me as a Buffalo Bills fan. I think what the Bills were looking for in Jordan Phillips is maybe some pass rush pop and some interior pressure. But to me, Jordan Phillips should have been the guy on the practice squad, and Eli Anku should have been the guy elevated to the Buffalo Bills 53-man roster because he deserves it. And as a guy who coaches like high school sports, like I kind of have some kind of understanding of like how locker rooms work and how locker rooms operate. And I can't imagine the Bills locker room seeing what just happened and being like, okay, I think at this point, the coaching staff and the GM have earned so much trust, and it's really not going to be a factor at all. But like, if I'm a player in that locker room and I watch Eli Anku bust his ass for 2 weeks, helping the Buffalo Bills stop the run and making some really notable plays, and we just signed Jordan Phillips back, who sucks at football and never is on the field because he's always hurt. Like, I'm kind of like, what? Why are we rewarding this guy and not rewarding the other? So a big whiff, in my opinion, for the Buffalo Bills, but hopefully Jordan Phillips proves us wrong today and has like 3 sacks on Joe Flacco and helps lead the Buffalo Bills to victory.
I mean, I feel like it, especially for this game, I thought Anku deserved the elevation, right? I mean, and really, honestly, maybe even until Dwayne Carter comes back, I just feel like against Jonathan Taylor, you'd want a bigger bodied guy who's better at defending the run, but who knows? Let's see what kind of impact Phillips has, assuming he's active, which we believe he will be. And I get that he's like an emotional kind of guy and can kind of give you momentum, but it's also his first game back, right? Not that that's going to be a huge factor because he's been with his team for many stints, but it does seem a little odd that for this game in particular, it wasn't Anku. And I think a lot of people also feel that way in the reaction you saw on social media and others, that he probably deserved it and he didn't get it. So we'll just have to see.
And then little over under for you. Over under 2.5 quarters before Jordan Phillips takes his first dumb penalty.
I'll say over. I think it'll be in the late third quarter.
It will be sometime in this game. Jordan Phillips will take a penalty, and everyone on social media will lose their minds. All right, up next is our Respect You player of the game. All right, people in the comments section, feel free to chime in as well, and we'll read off some of your responses. But Dave, who is your Respect You player of the game? This is one player from the Indianapolis Colts, or in my case, I usually name 2 or 3, that you have to respect in order to win this football game.
Yeah, I mean, talked a lot about Josh Downs, but I think it starts and ends with Jonathan Taylor. If you're the Bills defense against this Colts offense, trying to stymie the Colts on first down, Jonathan Taylor has been such a good yards per carry guy in his career. He is a complete back. He's a guy that will do damage to you out of the backfield if you allow it. He's only had 4 catches in 2 games since he's been back from his injury. So the Bills really, I think, need to do a good job in defending Taylor out of the backfield as well as a pass catcher. If they can slow the Colts down on first down, slow that running game down on first down, and force the Colts into some 3rd and longs where they do have a chance to maybe let Von Miller loose and kind of go after that statuesque quarterback in Joe Flacco, then for me, I'm going to have to say Jonathan Taylor is the guy that you have to key on and respect if you're the Bills, especially given the performance he had against this team a couple years ago, which I know is a different team, but man, that was tough.
Yeah, there are just so many people you could go with. You could go with Jonathan Taylor as you did. You could go with Josh Downs as Charles G did, work in the middle of the field and giving Flacco those quick throws. I think you could go with the Colts offensive line and just their ability to run block, being the best run blocking unit in all of football. I'm going to go with that triumvirate they have on defense. Grover Stewart, DeForest Buckner, Zaire Franklin. If I had to pick one, DeForest Buckner obviously is the first, but Grover Stewart would be a close second. Those 3 guys in the middle of that Colts defense are going to give the Buffalo Bills offensive line problems. The Buffalo Bills have to overcome that, plan around that, and they have to make sure they have a game plan to stymie or slow down those 3 guys, because the Colts defense has been playing good the last 2 or 3 weeks, right? We can look at the DVOA all we want, but the last couple of weeks, this defense has started to click, and it started to click in large part because of Grover Stewart, DeForest Buckner, Zaire Franklin, Kenny Moore out of the slot too, who we haven't even mentioned. So this Colts team has some really, really good players. And yes, I'm going to cheat every week because I have nothing but respect for our opponents. Nothing but respect. So that is our Respect You players of the game. And now on to our fire sale, our hottest takes from this one. All right, Dave, we will start with you, and feel free to chime in the comment section. Who's your wild card, or not wild card? What is your hottest take from this game?
My hot take is that both running backs have 85 plus scrimmage yards in this game. I think that it is a really good situation for the Bills to kind of run to the edges in this game with James Cook, use Ray Davis in the passing game, continue to use him in the passing game with probably Amari Cooper out of this game. The Bills very thin at receiver. Dalton Kincaid and Khalil Shakir will be the focus today of the Bills passing game, the traditional passing game. But I do think James Cook and Ray Davis, as you said, the big 4 in this game, Shakir, Kincaid, Cook, and Davis are critical to the Bills' success today. Cook and Davis both combined for big games, and they both have 85 plus scrimmage yards in this game.
My hot take of this game is that 3 players break 100 plus all-purpose yards on offense.
Wow.
I think 3 of it. Hey, did I finally get one spicy enough for
think
people?
That's hotter than mine, I think, because
did I finally get one hot enough for you? So I think 3 of James Cook, Ray Davis, Khalil Shakir, Dalton Kincaid will go over 100 all-purpose yards. 3 of those 4 on offense for the Buffalo Bills. Aaron Quinn says Matt Collins is going to finally hit on some of those deep balls. Maybe Jordan Phillips with like a 5-sack game. Would that be spicy enough for Jordan Phillips just going to come and shut everyone on social media up this week. Just going to go out and just get like 4 sacks. All right. Time to now. Spin says I was ready to get frostbitten by Judge's hot take, but I will give him this one. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Totally redeem yourself.
This makes up for an entire season of lukewarm takes.
Yes.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, now on to our pregame predictions. All right, ladies and gentlemen, now it is time for our pregame predictions. Let us know in the comment section what you think is going to happen in this football game. Give us your predictions. And Dave, start us off, paint a picture for us. Take us back to the future. What are we going to see today?
I think the Bills offense continues to play well. The one thing that worries me is that maybe they don't have as many possessions as we'd like them to have. I think the Colts offense will have some success. Look at what Miami did last week. Run the ball with Jonathan Taylor, use him out of the backfield, probably use the tight ends a bit more than they've used this year. Josh Downs, a chain mover for them as well. I think that this game, the Bills will win, but I think it's going to be a little bit more stressful than people think, because I think that they're going to have to put up points in fewer possessions than they're used to having throughout the season. So while I do think at the end I wouldn't say win a stress-free game, but I think in the end they end up winning by 10 points. And I will say the Bills will win this one. Bills 24, Colts 14.
Got Aaron Quinn coming in saying a lot more people watching this than likes. He says, hit that like button. It really helps. This joke is going to go out to people who are chronically online and probably have seen some of Jordan Phillips' interview quotes from this week. But if you like the Air Raid Hour pregame show as much as the Buffalo Bills like the way Jordan Phillips tastes, then smash that like button. All right. Dude, if I could have gotten a spit take out of you there, if I could have gotten a spit take from you there, that would have been great. Cool. But I did not. So close. Spin comes in and says 37-17. I hope he means Bills. Charles G comes in and says Bills 27-23. Charles Patterson coming in saying Bills 34-21. Darnell Davis saying Bills 31, Colts 21. Bass with a 62-yarder says Ralph Wilson Sr. I think that goes back to our hot takes. McNizzle says 34-18. And a couple people like RJ Milroy Collins have the Colts winning this game. And Aaron Quinn says 27-17. My prediction for this game, I think it's going to be tight. I think it's going to be really tight. Bills 23, Colts 20. I think the Colts defense is improving. Gave up 21 points to the Vikings last week, 23 points to the Texans the week before. I think the Bills are hemorrhaging at the wide receiver position, so they might not be as efficient on offense as in weeks past, but they'll still be efficient and get theirs on this Colts defense. Joe Flacco is going to minimize the pass rush with his quick release. Shane Steichen, we've mentioned this on the show. You just mentioned it in your prediction. He's going to see the over pursuit of the Buffalo Bills defensive line and exploit it like other offensive minds have in previous weeks. Jonathan Taylor is going to get his, but I do think the Buffalo Bills ultimately get enough stops in the red zone for some field goals. And maybe I should have picked Tyler Bass as my wild card player of the game, because in this prediction, his 3 field goals is what propel us to victory in my 23-20 prediction. All right, ladies and gentlemen. Oh, sorry, you got some comments?
I was gonna say, I think you're onto something. I mean, I had 24-14. So again, I see a lot of people predicting the Bills to have 30 plus points. I would love for that to happen, by the way. I think if the Bills score 30 plus, there's no way they lose this game. 100%. But I just feel like the number of possessions they're going to have today is going to be maybe 2 or 3 fewer than they're used to having on average. And I agree with Spin in the comments. If the Bills win the toss, they better defer. I want that extra possession, and the statistics show you on average get about 1.5 or so more possessions in a game if you defer. So definitely defer if you win the toss.
Aaron Quinn says tight Bills games and breakfast sandwiches are taking years off my life. Charles G says the air raid hour is an acquired taste, Judge, just like scotch, I think. So Ray Collins says try breakfast pizza instead, AQ. So listen, I'm only saying this because Picasso's does not make a breakfast pizza, so this is not a conflict of interest. Tops breakfast pizza. If you've never had it, go out and get some Tops breakfast pizza for this game. It is something that you will enjoy. It's the best breakfast pizza in Western New York. Pretty sad, but it is. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us this morning. We have some morning football for you, right? The Giants and the Panthers, and what's going to be just an epic showdown in Germany. I think somebody joked a couple of weeks ago when this game was announced, like, this is the final punishment for World War II. Panthers and Giants.
At least it's not the Jags again. Oh my God. I'm so sick of watching the Jags in the early game.
So you got some morning football to bide your time. You don't need to watch any of those network pregame shows. You will be joining the postgame show with Greg Tomsett. So make sure that if you immediately after the game, tune in right here, Cover One. We got you covered. Greg Tomsett and Dave will be taking you through everything on the postgame show. So talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. Post-game today, Aaron, I think, couldn't make it, so they asked me to fill in. So I've got a busy day ahead. Pre-game show this morning, post-game show this afternoon, and then air raid tomorrow. So I'll be a busy man the next day and a half, so hopefully people aren't getting too sick of me.
You can find us again tomorrow night at 9 p.m. We will be breaking down all things Bills Colts. Hopefully it is a good good post-game show, reaction show. Hopefully it's not a therapy session tomorrow, because after this week we have the Kansas City Chiefs, which is going to take years off our lives, just like the breakfast sandwiches are taking years off of Aaron Quinn's life. Thank you guys so much for joining us, and until next time, go Bills.
Go Bills.
Thank you for watching tonight's episode of the Air Raid Hour. Make sure to hit that like button on the way out. If you are catching the show on demand, leave a reply in the comments section and we will respond over the course of the week. You can always listen to every episode next day on all major podcasting platforms, including Apple Podcasts and Spotify, by searching Air Raid Buffalo. Thank you for your continued support, and as always, go Bills!